I never imagined my life would turn out this way, standing in a divorce court 2 years after what was supposed to be the happiest day of my existence. My name is Jung-Yul, and I'm about to tell you how I went from being hopelessly in love to desperately wanting to escape my marriage, only to have fate throw me the strangest curveball imaginable. This story begins not at the wedding, but at the moment everything started falling apart. Though I suppose to understand where I ended up, you need to know where I came from first. Nara and I had been together for years before we got married, and our relationship was one of those intense romances that burned so bright you don't notice it might consume everything around it. We came from completely different worlds, and maybe that should have been a warning sign. But when you're young and convinced that love conquers all, you ignore the red flags waving frantically in your peripheral vision. She came from money, from a family and soul that had expectations and standards, and a very clear picture of who their daughter should marry, and I was definitely not that picture. I was a guy who kept failing the bar exam, living in a small place outside the city, scraping by while I studied and hoped that one day I would pass and become a lawyer. Her family made it clear from the start that I wasn't good enough, that I would never be good enough, and honestly, part of me believed them. But Nara, she fought for us. She insisted that we could make it work, and eventually, despite all the opposition and all the doubt, we got married. Her parents reluctantly agreed to support me while I continued studying for the exam, which should have been a blessing, but instead became another source of tension between us. Marriage changed everything in ways I never anticipated. Suddenly, all those little differences that seemed charming when we were dating became massive obstacles to our daily happiness. She wanted to spend money freely, to enjoy life, to go out and have experiences, while I felt this crushing weight of obligation to pay back her family, to prove I wasn't just some freeloader who married into wealth. I became obsessed with saving every bit, with making sure I could show them I was worthy of their daughter, and in the process, I stopped seeing what was happening to Nara. She started drinking more and more, leaving bottles around our apartment, letting the place fall into chaos, and instead of asking what was wrong or trying to help, I just resented her for it. We argued about everything, from what to eat for lunch to how to spend our weekends, and every disagreement felt like proof that we had made a terrible mistake. The contempt grew slowly at first, then all at once, until we could barely stand to be in the same room. She would throw things past my head, aiming for our wedding photo on the wall, and I would make passive-aggressive comments about her drinking and her messiness. Our families watched us spiral, each side convinced that the other was to blame, and instead of being allies in our marriage, they became generals commanding opposing armies. When we finally agreed to get a separation, it felt like the only logical conclusion to 2 years of misery. We went to court, sat in front of judges, and laid out all our grievances, competing to see who could paint the other as the worse spouse. The judges gave us a 30-day settlement period to reconsider, which seemed pointless, because we were both absolutely certain that ending this nightmare was the only path forward. Then came the accident. We were leaving the courthouse, still arguing because apparently even our impending separation couldn't make us stop fighting, and our heated exchange turned into something that resulted in a car crash. I don't remember the impact, don't remember the immediate aftermath, just waking up in a hospital bed with no idea who I was or how I got there. The doctors explained that I had amnesia, that both Nara and I had lost our memories from the recent past, and when they brought her into my room, I looked at this woman and felt nothing. No love, no hate, no recognition whatsoever. She looked at me the same way, like I was a complete stranger, and in that moment, we essentially were strangers to each other. The medical team explained that we were married and going through a separation process, but without any emotional context, the information meant nothing. Our families had to make a decision about how to handle this unusual situation. The doctor suggested that we stay together during the recovery period, that familiar environments and people might help trigger our memories. So despite the fact that we had been desperate to separate just days before, Nara and I went home to our apartment together. Walking into that place was shocking even without memories, because the evidence of our troubled marriage was everywhere. Empty bottles covered the counters. The apartment smelled terrible, and there was a heaviness in the air that suggested 2 people had been very unhappy here. My mother and her family tried to explain what our relationship had been like, telling us stories about our constant fighting and mutual resentment. But hearing about it secondhand felt like learning about characters in a movie rather than our actual lives. The strange thing about losing your memory is that you also lose all the baggage that comes with a relationship. Nara and I started interacting as new people. without the weight of past arguments and disappointments crushing every conversation. I found myself noticing things about her that I must have stopped seeing somewhere along the way she laughed at unexpected moments, her determination when she set her mind to something, the vulnerability she tried to hide behind sarcasm. She seemed different too, less defensive, more open, and I caught her watching me sometimes with this curious expression, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. Our families kept pushing us to remember, showing us photos and recounting stories, but the memories they described felt like they belonged to other people. As the days passed and we spent more time together, something unexpected started happening. Without the history of hurt between us, we began falling for each other again. Or maybe for the first time in a different way. We would go out together to places that were supposed to be familiar, hoping to trigger memories, but instead, we just created new experiences. There was this lightness to our interactions, a playfulness that I suspect had been missing from our marriage for a long time. We laughed together. We talked about our dreams and fears without the filter of past disappointments. And slowly, I started to feel something real developing. The problem was that our families were not happy about this turn of events because they wanted us to remember so we could finalize the separation and everyone could move on with their lives. The countdown continued ticking toward the end of our 30-day period, and the pressure mounted to either remember our past or make a decision about our future. I started having flashes, brief moments where something would feel familiar, but I couldn't quite grasp the full memory. Nara experienced the same thing, these fragments of the past trying to break through, and we both knew that eventually we would have to confront whatever we had been to each other before. My friends tried to help by sharing stories about our friendship and the early days of my relationship with Nara, painting a picture of two people who had once been crazy about each other before everything went wrong. Her friends did the same, and slowly, a narrative emerged of a relationship that had started with genuine love, but gotten crushed under the weight of external pressures and internal insecurities. The moment when my memories started returning was both terrifying and clarifying. I remembered the fights, the resentment, the feeling of being trapped in a situation that made both of us miserable. But I also remembered the beginning, the reasons I had fallen in love with Nara in the first place. She was fierce and independent, smart and funny, and she had chosen me when everyone told her she shouldn't. I remembered the wedding day that almost didn't happen because I got scared and ran away, and how she had shown up in her wedding dress to tell me she wanted to be with me anyway. That memory hit me like a physical blow because it showed me the kind of person she was, someone willing to fight for what she believed in, and I realized that somewhere along the way, we had both stopped fighting for each other and started fighting against each other instead. When Nara's memories started coming back, she went through a similar process of reconciling the person she had been with the person she was becoming. The anger and bitterness were part of her past, but so was the love and the hope that had brought us together originally. We had to make a choice about whether the people we had been before the accident were who we truly were, or if the accident had given us a chance to become better versions of ourselves. Our families wanted resolution, the court needed an answer, and time was running out on our 30-day period. The question wasn't just whether we remembered our past, but whether we wanted to repeat it or create something new. I realized that the failure of our marriage wasn't just about incompatibility or bad timing. It was about two people who had stopped seeing each other clearly, who had let outside pressures and internal fears turn them into the worst versions of themselves. The amnesia had been devastating, but it had also been a gift in a strange way, giving us a chance to meet each other again without all the accumulated hurt and resentment. Standing at the end of those 30 days, with my memories mostly returned and a clearer understanding of what had gone wrong, I had to decide whether I wanted to walk away from Nara for good or take the terrifying risk of trying again. She faced the same choice, and neither of us could make it lightly because we both knew how badly things had gone before. The answer I arrived at wasn't simple or easy, but it felt true. I loved Nara. I had always loved her, even when I could barely stand to be near her, but love alone hadn't been enough to save us before. What we needed was understanding, compromise, and a willingness to actually work on our problems instead of letting them fester until they consumed everything good between us. Whether we could do that, whether we could learn from our mistakes and build something healthier, remained to be seen. But as I looked at this woman who had been my wife, my enemy, and my stranger all within the span of a few years, I knew that I wanted to try, and seeing the expression on her face, I thought maybe she wanted to try too, and that possibility felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for together.